And in the book of the letter to the Romans, chapter 9, we can see Paul's grief and upset over when he's upset about Jews not recognizing their own Messiah. Remember, he's a Jew, and he says, it hurts me that my brothers, my kin according to the flesh, do not recognize, right, the Messiah, right? Even though we're Israelites, right? We're the ones who God made his people. We're the one who God made his covenant with, gave us the law, right? Showed us how to worship in the temple, right? Gave us the patriarchs and the prophets and all this stuff. Why is it we don't recognize the Messiah, right? Or better said, why is it that only a few of us have recognized the Messiah? He's our Messiah. He says this is a thing. This makes him sad. And then he goes on to say that the Gentiles, and he calls himself the apostle to the Gentiles because he was one of the ones who really started this movement of including the Gentiles in the church. And he lived out his ministry going around to Gentile cities and converting primarily, or just spreading the faith, spreading the good news of salvation through Jesus Christ to primarily Gentiles. He's going to remind those Gentiles to not think that they are better than Jews who missed their own Messiah just because they recognize the Messiah, but recognize them as the root or the source of that Messiah in the first place. So he says they're the first fruits, right? These are the Jewish believers, or even the Jewish people throughout history. They're the root, the holy root, right, through which the Messiah came. And that's why the branches, right, which will now include the Gentile, are also holy. So in other words, you owe this whole thing to them. You owe the Jews for salvation through Jesus Christ. They're the ones who brought it to you. Then he goes on to question, do you think that they have made this mistake as an expression of ultimate failure? Do you think that this is the last word, right? I said, did they stumble so as to fall? No, they didn't stumble to fall. What happened? They stumbled to get better footing. They stumbled for some good reason, right? And here's how he sees it. He thinks that God is going to use the conversion of the Gentiles to really wake the Jews up to the truth, right? He says, you're going to have you have the Jewish roots of the Messiah. And then God is going to add to that many, many Gentiles. And then when all these Gentiles come into the church, the Jews are really going to have the Jews who don't believe Jesus is the Messiah are going to have to look at what the heck is going on. And then through that movement, come to understand more deeply what the Messiahship of Jesus means. And then they'll come back in, right? I mean, look what he says here. I don't want you to be unaware of this mystery, brother, so that you will not become wise in your own estimation. A hardening has come upon Israel in part. Now, remember that in part, right? Because still, you have many Jews who have accepted Jesus as the Messiah, have recognized it. Again, the whole early church was all Jewish. And even in this latter part of the first century, you still have a lot of Jews in the church and Peter and Paul themselves, right? So there are many Jews who believe Jesus was Messiah, or else the religion never would have even started, right? So a hardening has come in part on Israel until the full number of Gentiles come in, right? All the Gentiles come in. And then what will happen once all those Gentiles come in? Then all the Jews will come back in, right? This is what he says. Look at this word. All Israel will be saved. Now, this is what we've forgotten, what we forgot in the church. This idea that is stated clearly by St. Paul here, that God's plan is to save the Israelites. And that includes then the Jews, right? They're one of the 12 tribes of Israel. So it's not like, oh, the Gentiles got it and the Israelites didn't. So the Gentiles are going to experience salvation and the Israelites aren't. No. God started with the Israelites. He revealed his Messiah. Some of the Israelites got it, right? Some of the Jews got it. A lot didn't. But then all these Gentiles are going to come in. And then eventually all these Jews are also going to come in, right? All the ones that aren't in yet. Does it make sense? And of course, he backs it up there with quotes from the Old Testament. So here's God's plan in a nutshell. He allows the Jews who don't believe Jesus is the Messiah, right? And these are represented by these branches over here on the ground. He allows them to break themselves off, right? Again, he takes this vision of the olive tree. You can see the olive tree. Here's the Jews. This is the Hebrew roots, the Jewish roots, all the Old Testament, God's covenant with Abraham and his descendants forever, right? And the Messiah is born out of that, right? Now, some of the Jews, by not trusting in God, by recognizing Jesus as the Messiah, they broke themselves off. They're off the tree now, right? True enough, they're off the tree, okay. And then what happened is some of these branches from other trees, the pagan root, the Gentiles, right, non-Jews, they got grafted on the tree, right? So someone might say, oh, you're gone and we took your place, so that's over for you and it's all good for us. But that's not where Paul goes with it, right? He said these Gentiles, they've been grafted on or attached to the tree. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but apples are usually grown this way in apple orchards, where you have a trunk of one kind of tree and then another kind of apple is attached onto the branch, or the branch is attached onto this tree. And so it will grow a different type of apple. But the trunks that they use are the best growing trunks. It's very interesting. So you kind of have a standard apple tree trunk, which in itself didn't grow the best apples, but they put other branches onto it. And how they do this is you splice the bottom of the branch, and then you splice the larger branch you're attaching it to, and you tie them together. And if you do it right, they will grow right into each other. And the new branch will become a living part of the original tree. And that's what happened with the Gentiles, right? We were added on to the Jewish tree. So again, we owe the tree. We're becoming part of their tree. We shouldn't think, oh, well, we got it better than you, right? Which was some of the Gentiles apparently were talking down on the Jews. And Paul says, no, understand how it works. But Paul goes on to say that if you, who came from a different kind of tree, were so easily attached to this tree, which is not the same kind of tree as you, and you become a living part of it, don't you think God could take these branches that broke off and reattach them? Wouldn't that be even easier? And also, if they were part of the natural tree and they broke off, you could also break off. You're not guaranteed that you're going to stay in here on the tree, right? So Paul is, saying, it's not, this is, again, very in keeping with what we saw in the Old Testament, where the people of Israel are the people who choose to trust God, right? And that's what we're seeing here with the new people of God, the people who choose to trust Jesus. And guess what? There's no guarantee. You could stop doing that, you're off. You start doing that, you'll be back on, right? But in the end, right, what will come in? A full number of Gentiles, many we're told, right? We can even hope all, right, will come in. And specifically says in Paul's letter to the Romans, all of Israel will be saved, all the Jews. So according to the Bible, all the Jews are going to be saved. And how does this happen? How do we become saved? Well, we be the people of God, right? We trust in Jesus, and therefore we listen to him and we love each other. And here's a section where he talks about, hey, you're on now, but you could fall off. Just like they're off now, but God's going to attach them back on. But again, it comes down to that choice. It's not your ethnicity. It's not, hey, you're a Gentile and your parents are Christian and you go to church. It's actually doing it. It's actually living. You have to make the choice, right? And it's not just believing. I talk about belief. This doesn't mean you say that you accept salvation in Christ. No, it means that you actually respond, right? You actually do what Jesus said. If you believe Jesus is God, then you should do what he said, right? Not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, not everyone who cries out, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father in heaven. That's what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 7, verse 21. So again, it comes back to that choice, right? You put your trust in Jesus. And again, that is a real thing. If you really trust Jesus, then you're going to follow his advice, and you're going to love and help others. And that's what we see in the people of God, right? You could be Jew, Gentile, whatever. The people who trust in Jesus, the people who follow Christ's one commandment to love one another as I have loved you. That's from John 13:34. Those people are his disciples.